I hate telling this story. It's probably the worst thing that I saw happen at camp. We made one phone call and everything got worse. And it was the moment I realized doing everything right doesn't always protect a kid. No one was hurt, no rules were broken, there was no investigation. If you pulled the incident report or whatever paperwork exists, it would all be clean. But it's the one that stayed with me, even after all these years. I met him on the ropes course. It was mid afternoon, hot enough that the wooden platforms burned your palms if you forgot to keep moving. The course sat at the edge of the tree line, a mess of beams and ladders and swaying bridges, all of it low enough to be safe, but high enough to feel impossible if you were 8. He stood at the base of the ladder, helmet on, crooked, hands clenched at his sides. "I can't do it," he said, already crying. Not screaming, not refusing, just crying the way kids do when fear gets ahead of them. Silent tears, breathing wrong, eyes fixed on the first rung like it had personally betrayed him. His cabin mates gathered without being told. One kid sat beside him on the mulch. Another started explaining the course again, slower this time. Someone offered to go first. I crouched down so we were at eye level. "You don't have to do it," I said. "You can sit this one out." He shook his head immediately. "I want to," he said. "I just can't." That distinction mattered. We waited. No one rushed him. One of the other counselors cracked a joke about how the bridge looked worse than it was. Someone else reminded him he'd already done the cargo net that morning. Eventually, he wiped his face on his sleeve and climbed the ladder. Slow, careful, shaking a little. When he reached the platform, everybody clapped, not loudly, not to embarrass him, just enough to let him know that it counted. He crossed the bridge, holding the rope so tightly his knuckles went white. He cried again halfway across, but he kept going. At the end, he was grinning like he'd just beaten something much bigger than the course. That was how he was all week. Afraid sometimes, tearful, but never stuck. He tried, he finished, he rejoined his group. The other kids looked out for him without being asked. No one mocked him, no one excluded him. That's camp when it works. After the course, I took him up to the dining hall for ice cream. It wasn't a scheduled snack or anything official, just something the staff encouraged us to do when a kid pushed through a fear or went above and beyond. The building was quiet when we walked in, empty enough that our footsteps echoed. The walls were plastered with smiling photos from past summers, canoes, campfires, kids with their arms around each other, and a few laminated notices with phone numbers, CPR instructions, and the camp song. We went straight to the ice cream freezer, a big chest-style thing tucked against the wall, painted in a faded blue pattern with 2 cartoon polar bears on the lid, the kind of decoration that looked old and odd even when it was new. He stood on his toes to see inside and picked one carefully. We sat at the table and ate together. The only sound in the room was the steady cycling of a compressor somewhere behind the kitchen doors. He didn't talk much. He didn't have to. It felt, in that moment, exactly like camp was supposed to feel. The nights were harder. The first night, he cried after lights out. Quietly, I sat on the bunk beside him, talked him through it, stayed until his breathing slowed. The second night was easier. He woke once, then he settled. By the third night, I wasn't worried. That night started like any other. The cabin loop glowed with a soft yellow light, crickets loud enough to cover small noises, kids whispering jokes they'd forgot by morning, someone shushing gently, not sharply. I sat on a bunk edge and waited, like always. He was in his usual spot near the wall. When he whispered that he couldn't sleep, I went over. "I know," I said, "it's hard sometimes." He cried a little, not much. I stayed. He calmed. I left. An hour later, another camper woke me. He's crying again. This time I walked him outside so the others could sleep. The air was cool. The big field was empty. He leaned against the railing and told me he missed home. "I think about it too much at night," he said. "That's normal. I told him, "Your brain has nothing else to do." He nodded like that made sense. Eventually, he stopped shaking. I brought him back, tucked him in, waited again. That's when admin suggested calling home. Not as a punishment, not as a threat, just to keep the parents informed. Transparency, procedure. I hesitated but agreed. I believed the call would calm things down. The call went out around 9. I didn't hear much, just the opening apology, then raised voices. Then the tone shifted, fast, defensive, sharp. "They're upset," the admin said afterward. "They're driving in." "Driving in? How far?" I asked. "About 4 hours." I remember thinking, that's excessive. I didn't think, this is dangerous. The next morning was bright and ordinary in a way that felt almost cruel. Breakfast dishes were already stacked by the sinks. The field was alive with noise, shoes pounding dirt, counselors calling out teams, whistles cutting cleanly through the laughter. The air still held that cool edge that only lasts an hour or two before the heat sets in. The kids were all fine. That mattered to me. I remember noticing it deliberately, as if it might still count for something. He was out there with the group, tired, but in good spirits, his hair still damp from a rushed shower. He wasn't leading the game, but he wasn't hiding either. He ran a little slower than the others, but he ran. When he tagged one of the older kids and managed to dart away, he laughed, an open, relieved sound, like he was surprised by himself. I remember thinking, he's through it. The rest will be better. Then the car pulled in. For a second, no one reacted. Cars come all the time, deliveries, staff, parents picking up early. Then the car stopped. The mother got out first. She moved fast, purposeful. Her posture was already set, shoulders forward, jaw tight. The father followed more slowly. He didn't look at the field, didn't take in the noise or the kids in the morning. He just walked, hands in his pockets, eyes down. The child saw them. I watched his body react before his face did. His shoulders pulling inward, his feet stopping short. Relief crossed his expression first, instinctive and hopeful. Then confusion. Then something like calculation. And finally, fear, sharp and immediate. "I was good," he said loudly before anyone spoke. He took a step toward them, then hesitated. "I didn't cry last night." The mother didn't slow down. "He does this," she said, already speaking past him, her voice carrying across the field. "At home, too." She didn't look at him when she said it. She gestured vaguely in his direction, like he was an example she'd already explained too many times. "This is exactly why we sent him here," she continued, "to learn how to deal with it." The game behind us faltered. Kids stopped running. A whistle blew once, uncertain, then fell silent. The father stopped a step behind her. He stayed there, silent, his face blank in a way that didn't signal disagreement so much as withdrawal. He didn't contradict her. He didn't intervene. He didn't kneel down or say the kid's name. The child turned toward me instead. "I can stay," he said quickly, the words tumbling over each other. "I can do it. I'm okay now." He reached for me and grabbed my shirt, right at the hem, fingers curling tight like he was afraid I would vanish. "I'll be good," he said. "I promise. I can sleep. I can..." His voice broke. He swallowed hard and tried again. "Please don't make me go." I knelt down. I tried to keep my voice even. I said his name. I told him I believed him. I told the parents he was doing well. That he'd had a hard night, yes, but that this wasn't unusual. He was getting better. That he'd already come through it before. "Look at him," I said, gesturing to the field. "He's okay." One of our admin staff had come over by then. She stood slightly to the side, not inserting herself too aggressively. Hands open, posture calm. She spoke carefully, the way you do when you're already anticipating resistance. "We really think another night would be helpful," she said. "He's settling in. We can adjust support if needed." The mother laughed once, short, humorless, So now he needs special handling, she said. That's not what this place advertises. She finally looked down at him. You embarrassed yourself, she said, and now you're doing it again. The child shook his head, panicked. No, he said, I was just scared, but I'm not scared now. That's what you always say, she replied. And then we get this phone call. The admin tried again, gently. They're his parents, she said quietly to me, and not as an argument, just as a fact, a boundary. The mother reached for his arm. Not rough, not violent, but decisive, claiming. The child resisted, just enough to make it visible. His feet slid back in the grass. His grip on my shirt tightened. No, he said louder. Please, I didn't do anything wrong. By now, campers on the field were standing, unsure of what to do. 3 counselors stood with them, caught up in the moment themselves. The father opened the car door. That was when the scream came. It ripped out of him, sudden, piercing, completely unfiltered. Not long, not sustained, just raw panic. The sound a child makes when they understand all at once that no one is going to stop what's happening. The door slammed shut, sound cut off instantly. The field was dead silent. Kids stood frozen, unsure whether they were allowed to keep looking. A counselor finally blew the whistle again, too loud this time, trying to restart something that had already broken. The campers just kept watching. As they walked back to the car, the mother shook her head, exhaling sharply. In the future, she said, halfway to admin, halfway to herself, this place needs to be better equipped for kids like him. As she put the car in drive, I watched the rear window roll down, enough so the kid could stick his head out and yell. It wasn't much of a yell, more of a sob. He managed, choking through tears. I can learn how to stop. I heard his mother yell something. The child continued, I can be quiet. I can be whatever you want. And his voice was cut off as his mom closed the rear window. The car pulled away. The dust settled. Someone laughed nervously. The game restarted, awkwardly, like a record skipping back into place. I went back to the cabin later. All of his stuff was still there. The bed was made wrong, the blanket folded too fast. The small flashlight was still under the pillow, switched on, its beam fading against the wood. No one asked questions. Tomorrow was normal. That's why I stopped, because we did everything right, and something irreversible still happened. Children often believe that if they try a little harder, they can fix the way the world responds to them. Most of us carry pieces of that belief long after childhood fades. When someone shows you their fear and keeps going anyway, it's a kind of bravery worth protecting. Hold space for those fragile efforts in others and in yourself.